Bob Menendez was a career politician. He rose the ranks of New Jersey politics before being elected to serve in Congress. At the height of his career, he was one of the most powerful Democrats in the Senate, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That all came crashing down. An indictment outlined an elaborate arrangement that alleged Menendez used his government position to benefit multiple New Jersey businessmen, as well as the Egyptian and Qatari governments, in exchange for luxury gifts and cash. Federal agents found some of those bribes while searching his home. Gold bars hidden in a closet, cash stuffed into clothing and shoes, and a Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the garage. In 2024, Menendez was found guilty on all 16 charges against him, including bribery, fraud, and acting as a foreign agent, and was ultimately sentenced to 11 years. Isabel, Vincent, and Thomas Jason Anderson, authors of Gold Bar Bob, The Downfall of the Most Corrupt U.S. Senator, joined Forbes True Crime to discuss Menendez's meteoric rise and eventual stunning fall. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, the host of Forbes True Crime. Joining me now is Isabel Vincent and Thomas Jason Anderson, the co-authors of Gold Bar Bob. Isabel and Thomas, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
At one point, Bob Menendez was one of the most powerful lawmakers and Democrats in this country. He served as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Life looks a lot different now for the former politician. He's currently sitting behind bars. He's serving out an 11-year jail sentence. He was found guilty on all charges against him in his corruption trial. Your new book explores the meteoric rise and just incredible fall of Bob Menendez. I'm curious, I want to ask you to start off the conversation, who is Bob Menendez? Because in the book, he's described in a lot of different ways. He's entitled, self-serving, hardworking, at points a beloved politician who really helps his constituents out. So to start off the conversation, how would you both characterize Bob Menendez?
Tom, do you want to go first or?
Well, sure. I mean, I think he's really a combination of everything you've ever heard about him, really. Seriously. I mean, he's a chameleon, first of all, which allows him to be all types of other types of political creatures. And so sometimes he's a tough guy when he has to be a tough guy. Sometimes he's a really nice guy who really services his constituents. But at the end of the day, I would, if I were to define Bob Menendez, I would say that he's more defined by the environment he grew up in and by the nation that gave him the opportunity that he was able to take advantage of. And so he truly is an American story. You could only be in America. There's no other place in the world where you could go from being where he was, basically born. He was born in New York City on January 1st, 1954, poor, to a mother, to illegal immigrants into the country, basically, and who did not have citizenship. He had two older siblings already. His father had a gambling problem. He was an alcoholic, and so Bob was born into that situation, and he was able to rise from that to become the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, one of the most powerful politicians in the history of our country. And that could only happen in America. But at the same time, he was brought down. His corruption brought him down, which is also an American story. Because in other places in the world, when someone gets as powerful as him, it's impossible to dislodge them. But in America, yes, America gives, but America also takes away. And so I just think if you want to define Bob, he's a true American story, and he's a reflection of the times that he grew up in and the times that he was a politician in.
And Isabel, what about you? Because you were covering Bob Menendez for around a decade.
Yeah, more than that, actually. I mean, I like to think of Bob Menendez in Shakespearean terms, hubris, all these overarching ambitions that he had. But I think one of the best descriptions of Bob Menendez came from a letter to Judge Sidney Stein, so the federal judge who just sentenced him to 11 years in prison. And it was from his daughter, Alicia Menendez, and she described her father as scrappy. Again, just building on what Thomas said, somebody who came from nothing, a real self-made man who rose through the politics of New Jersey. I mean, he grew up in Union City, hard scrabble town across the Hudson. His original backers were sort of the Cuban mob. And but he never let that be sort of a blemish on his career. I mean, he sort of made up who he was. He claimed that his family was fleeing Cuba. So his mother, two siblings, and his dad fled Cuba in, like, we don't actually know the date, but he claimed that they were coming to escape um, appropriations by the Castro regime, but in fact, they came way before Fidel Castro came to power. But that was an important sort of life story for him, if you will, because um, he wanted to build a base with the anti-Castro Cubans in South Florida and in Union City. And what Tom and I discovered, what I didn't know was that Union City was really the northern headquarters of the anti-Castro movement in the United States. So this is where he came from. And as Thomas said, he reached the pinnacle of American democratic politics and then had like a huge slide down.
And he reached that pinnacle, but at the beginning, as you said, he started in local New Jersey politics. He started in Union City. He was the protege of Bill Musto. He was the former mayor of Union City. And when I was reading your book, I guess I was taken aback by just how corrupt New Jersey politics were. I mean, this person was charged with corruption, this person bribery, this person fraud. I mean, there was just a laundry list when you're looking at that. But despite Bill Musto ultimately going down for corruption, he was beloved in that community.
Right.
Bob Menendez was his protege, ultimately turned against him. Do you think that history there of having his start in this almost corrupt political landscape, do you think that shaped Bob Menendez at all?
Oh, of course. But one of the cardinal rules he broke was, so everybody's corrupt in Union City, so we're talking about the 1970s at this point. But there's the law, and then there's the rules. So the rules, what Bob Menendez did was he broke the rules. And I'll give you an example. I interviewed a man who had grown up in Union City. He went to high school there. He was chosen to go on a trip to Finland and represent like Emerson High School. And when he came back, Bill Musto, the mayor, called him into his office and said, "We're really proud of you. What can we do for you?" And he was, 19 at the time, and he wanted to go to college. So he said, "I'd like a job at the post office. I hear it pays really well." And so Musto said, "Well, I can't give you the job. You have to like go through the rules. You have to take the test." So he took the test, got 100%, and got a job at the post office delivering mail. And he would finish his shift by, 11 a.m. And when the rest of the post office, like staff, realized that he was doing really well, they called him over and said, "Dude, we're going to break your legs if you don't finish at 5." And that was how, strong the union was, how strong those rules were. So what he did was after his route at 11 a.m., he would just, sit in a parking lot and read books until 5 p.m. So he didn't break the rules. He understood that if you broke the rules, that was really the law. So what Bob Menendez did is he not only broke the law, but he broke those sacred rules of Union City when he testified against his mentor at his trial. And this sort of, led to, the big downfall that comes, several years later fast forward to 2023, when he breaks the laws and the rules of that little community.
And Thomas, I guess I'll turn to you next because, as you said, he testified against his mentor. He was now seen by some, especially who loved Musto, as a rat. And in New Jersey, home to the Sopranos, I mean, that's not exactly something that you want to be viewed as. And so, Bob Menendez, shining star student, a new and upcoming face in New Jersey politics, testifies against corruption. Somehow along the way, though, he becomes the face of corruption. I want to read what the judge, Sidney Stein, as he was sentencing him, this is what he said. "Somewhere along the way, you became, I'm sorry to say, a corrupt politician." And the book says that this is the downfall of the most corrupt US senator. So, Thomas, if you could pinpoint exactly where you think that was, where Menendez lost his way.
Well, I think the discussion about Musto is a good one. I think you can sort of start there, and from the way I viewed it was more on a human level, where Musto and his wife would allow Bob to eat dinner at their house like every night, right? And he would come in, and Musto's wife said he'd come in and he'd have paper plugging the holes in his shoes. Like that's how poor he was. So the Mustos, fed him when he really didn't have that, really good food to eat. He was so poor, he had holes in his shoes, and they looked out for him. They even got him his first wife. So his first wife was arranged by Bill Musto. And so when I saw how he betrayed Musto by testifying against him on a trial that when you look at the details of it, it's very questionable that Musto actually broke the law. I know he was found guilty, but when you look at the facts of the trial, it's sort of sketchy. It wasn't really a slam dunk case, okay? And so for Bob Menendez to testify against him, what to me, I think that's where he poisoned his soul. That's where, he turned his back on the people who taught him everything that he needed to know, because his father was an alcoholic, was a gambler, right? His father really wasn't raising him. And so Musto was that surrogate father. And so he totally betrayed him. And I think that was the beginning. That was the poisoning of his soul, was turning on the people who fed him when he had holes in his shoes and taught him everything and even got him his first wife. I think that was the beginning of it all.
And that's what stuck out to me in the book. I want to read a line. You both write this. The betrayal of Musto laid the foundation for the betrayal of an entire nation he was elected to serve. And something about Bob Menendez, it seems like he is a political cat with nine lives. His 2017 corruption trial ended in a mistrial. Then this one is the one that ultimately took him down. I mean, when you're looking at all of this corruption that he was accused and then found guilty of, to both of you, what sticks out to you the most? I'm assuming the gold bars are pretty high up there,
Yes.
considering the book's called Gold Bar Bob.
I think the gold bars nailed it because during when the prosecution presented the case, they actually brought in the props. They brought in the gold bars and they allowed the jury to hold those bars. And I think that's what, for the first time you had stuff you could see. I mean, we saw the gold bars in his disclosures a few years before anything happened. And we were like, who's got what? Who's got gold bullion at home? And then and we didn't, unbeknownst to us, that's when the FBI raided his home. They raided his home 5 times and they found gold bars. They found hundreds of thousands of dollars stuck in his shoes in cash. I mean, these are things. I think this sealed it for him. Like for the first time, you had visible, tangible evidence that you could hold. Whereas, with the other trial uh, in New Jersey, okay, you had like flights on private jet, you had like a lavish stay in Paris, but to actually hold the physical evidence, I think that sealed it for him.
I mean, and to that point, I've been producing and covering and reporting on political news for almost a decade now. And I think something that sticks out with political scandals when you're reading about them are obviously it's all in the details. And it's the details that really, in this case, the money stuffed into his Senate jacket, the
Yeah.
gold bars, because that sounds like a scene out of a mob movie. Thomas, I pose the same question to you. I mean, what stuck out to you the most about these crimes and the corruption at large? I mean, what are those details that are most shocking?
Well, to me, maybe that's not the most shocking, but I thought it was the most pivotal is when he got into league with Nadine. I think that partnership is really what did him in, because with her came the Egyptians, and with the Egyptians came the gold bars, right? And all this craziness. And what also came with the Egyptians was the covering up of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist, right? So once he linked up with Nadine, that's not the most shocking thing he did, but it was the most pivotal because she was that. I'm not going to say that she was the reason for his downfall, right? But it was the combination of those two that made him come down, right? That combination. And so that's what I would say would have been to me the most pivotal part of his entire journey was linking up with Nadine.
And it seemed like that was the real catalyst, right? You point out in the book a voice note that she leaves the senator. You say that this is what sealed his fate. I have a favor to ask you. Hopefully, you can do it. And I mean, I'm just talking for myself here. I've never been convicted or even said to have committed any type of corruption. But if I got away with it the first time, wouldn't you, try to stay on the straight and narrow again? But that didn't really seem to be the case with Bob Menendez. Why do you think he dipped his toe into the corruption pool with Nadine? Was it hubris? Was it stupidity? Was it naivete? Did he think that he just could get away with it again? I mean, was because he did at some points act like the victim here. Did he think he was the victim who did nothing wrong? I mean, if you had to get in Bob Menendez's head, both of you, what do you think the reasoning is?
Oh, so many reasons, but he did get away with it time and again, and he got away with it in 2017, as you mentioned, at his trial in New Jersey federal court. That ended up being a hung jury. So I think that emboldened him. And then when Nadine presented, all of these new friends, and they weren't, all of them weren't new friends. I mean, he knew these people, he knew these business people from New Jersey, and he just felt, I think he felt he could get away with it. And I also think he was in love with her, and wanted to win her over. And, because he himself is shocked from some of those first texts that she sends him. She sends him a text with, "Oh, I want you to meet some of my Egyptian friends. And, oh, could you look up the new Suez Canal situation?" And he writes back "Really? Question mark, question mark, question mark. So I think some of it shocked him at the beginning, but okay, he's gonna please his girlfriend. He's in love with this woman. I think we don't, we don't put a lot of emphasis on that, and I think that was one of the reasons that just pushed him forward.
What about Nadine? Do you think that she was as in love with him as he was reportedly, as you're saying, with her? Or do you think that she went into this relationship really with the intent of using Bob Menendez? I'm not sure exactly if she's this criminal mastermind, considering she put a lot of what she was doing in writing.
That's a very good point. I think that um, I, I think Nadine saw an opportunity, and I don't think she thought too much about it. I think she was, I mean, this is a woman who's a very selfish character in this whole situation. I mean, we've got her, um, what came to light during the indictment was the fact that she had been in it. The reason she needed a new Mercedes was that because she totaled her old car when she ran over a pedestrian and killed him in on a dark street on her way to a dinner in New Jersey. And there's not, when we got the video of her talking to the police, there wasn't a lot of concern for the poor guy who had just died. And in fact, I reached out to his family. They didn't want to talk, but it just seemed like, where was this in the equation? I mean, it was so Gatsby-esque, Daisy Buchanan running over a pedestrian with her car and just not caring. And so I saw the same kind of thing with, I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. If you had done this in fiction, nobody would have believed you. And so you've got that, aspirational, the woman with a collection of, all of these designer handbags. One of the things that we foiled was we foiled a police report when she was involved in a love triangle with Bob Menendez and Doug Anton, a lawyer that she was seeing in New Jersey. At one point, she disappears, and Anton puts out a missing persons report. Well, the police break into her home and then do this report of what's in the home. And she's like 20 Dior handbags and Louis Vuitton handbags. I mean, and most of them are real. And this is a woman who aspires to a different lifestyle. So I don't know that she thought very deeply about what she was doing and what she was asking her husband to do. I think she saw a real opportunity and
And
just took advantage of it.
Thomas, what do you make of Nadine in all of this and in Bob Menendez's story, especially given the fact that in his trial he ended up distancing himself from his wife?
Well, one of the reasons why I think he did, and partially he was correct to want to distance himself a little bit for this reason. Nadine brought in that international community behind her. So he ended up getting involved with that Armenian genocide thing and passing, legislation for the first time where the US government recognized that that was a genocide by the Turks, right? So he ended up getting involved through her with all of these international characters like these Armenians and the Egyptians, right? And that window of influence, of international influence from that part of the world that she brought in because of the relationship really started to send him on a tailspin. And I think it was that international influence that got her having the bright ideas of, hey, let's try this or that, because you had this street hustler guy named Weil Hanna who, was in her ear constantly probably thinking of a million and one schemes of using Bob's position as a senator to help the Egyptian government, and in turn they would all get paid riches for it, right? So which is why she got Bob to help her set up an LLC where Weil Hanna's halal meat company would pay her what I think it was like $10,000 a month or something in a no-show ghost job, for example. And so she was bringing in these crazy schemes that are being thought up of by these international thug street guys, right? Like Weil Hanna. And when you connect that international street thuggery with the United States Senate, you get what happened here, right? Like this is why it got so crazy. And this is why it's crazier than fiction, because you just wouldn't believe that a United States Senator could get caught up with Egyptian street hustler guys, right? But the way it happened is because of Nadine and how she was always such a social butterfly in New Jersey, and she connected with her international background with those types of characters. So that's what she brought through the door. And I think that's what Bob was probably regretting. Now, when he thinks back on it, like, man, she brought in all of these fleas from these places around the world that I didn't know about, and they really tore me up here. Like, I think that's what he was thinking, and he has, and rightfully so. That was the dynamic she brought that was so dangerous for him, I believe.
As you note, so many of the details featured in the book really are stranger than fiction. But I'm curious, when you're looking at Bob Menendez and his corruption trial, those charges, and him ultimately being found guilty, what impact did that have on the recent political landscape? I want to read one of the lines from your book. This is what you write. He contributed to the flagging fortunes of his own party and may even have unintentionally helped usher in the catastrophe of the 2024 election. He was also such a well-connected Democrat. You write about his really close relationship with Hillary Clinton and other high-profile Democrats. I mean, what was that impact both on the 2024 election and the Democratic Party at large?
I think he certainly contributed to the debacle of the 2024 election for the Democrats. I mean, here was a man who was indicted on, again, go back to the gold bars. Everybody saw that, when the indictment came out, and then you had the trial, and the the jury was given the bars to hold. And here is this guy who's still in the Senate, who's still going to all of these high level meetings. Chuck Schumer just doesn't do anything with him. Because why? Because he needs his vote. I mean, because of the way, the balance of power in the Senate. So I think to a voter, it's like, come on, guys, get rid of him already. There was like a long there was like a long runway to getting to Bob Menendez's resignation. You know, at one point he was still going to run. He was going to run as an independent. It's like, get over yourselves. Like this guy shouldn't be anywhere near the Senate.
And Thomas, what about you? I mean, what do you think his impact here is both on the party and the election?
Yeah, I think from the inside, he was like a parasite to the party, and he was using the party's stature in our nation's politics and the party's foundation and its power in order to help him try to convince a jury that he was innocent of crimes that he committed.
Good
Because at
point.
the end of the day, if the Senate had if Schumer and the senators in the Senate had kicked him out, then he would have looked to a potential jury as, yeah, that guy is guilty. But with him staying in, and with him still staying in the Foreign Relations Committee seat that he had, he wasn't chairman anymore, but he still had his committee assignments. He was still able to receive confidential, secret CIA briefings and stuff like that, where you need top secret clearance. So he was able to do all of that, and that allowed him to tell a potential jury and to tell the voters in New Jersey, look, this is all political. If I had done any of this, if this gold bar stuff was true, don't you think Chuck Schumer and these guys would have removed me a long time ago? The fact that I'm still here proves that they know that this is political, and so please allow me to have my trial, and I'll prove my innocence, and everyone will see that this was just a political hit job. That's what he was doing, and by doing that, he held the entire party down during one basically this election in 2024 was one of the biggest elections in all of our lifetimes, right? So, in one of the biggest elections in the history of all of us who are alive right now, he was pinning the Democrats down with his corruption and forcing them to hang on to him through the entire political season just because he needed to prove to a jury that he was innocent and he so that he could get off and get away with the corruption that he committed. So he literally sacrificed his entire party. In 2024, the election results proved it.
And to that point, I mean, he's gotten credibility from lawmakers before, right? Bipartisan credibility. Senators Cory Booker and Lindsey Graham both testified on his behalf in that first trial. But Isabel, you've been an investigative reporter for years covering corruption cases. Thomas, you are director of a government watchdog organization. What about Bob Menendez's story is different than anything you've ever worked on before?
Wow, it's a good question. I think the sheer hubris, and again, I go back to the the evidence, the un, you know, you couldn't he couldn't lie his way out of the money in his shoes and in his jacket pockets, and that was found in his house, the texts back and forth to his wife, setting up meetings. The, I mean, I think there are still things that he did that we don't know about, especially on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. When we discovered that he'd covered up the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and we found out about that in a sentencing memo, just before he was sentenced. It was just there. I think a lot of people missed it. What else did he do that we don't know about, on especially on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? I mean, that is a very powerful government body that, you know, signs treaties, allows foreign governments to buy American armaments. What else is going on that we don't know about? I mean, this is something we talked about and something that we want to maybe try to get more information on, but we don't know the extent of his corruption, is what I'm saying.
And Thomas, what about you? What is different about Bob Menendez than anything you've worked on?
Okay, so for me, it's clear cut and easy. This one, he to me, he was a master at being able to tame the media. That's what he was a master at. he was able to use his position in the Senate in that Foreign Relations Committee and his access to privileged information from the CIA and other agencies. He was able to wield that and use that in the media space to control all of our major media outlets, to get them to report on major world international stories in a way that benefited the people who were paying him cash and gold bars, not in a way that benefited the American people, right? And so I have never seen a person be able to basically cast a spell over the media, the legacy media, especially the way that he has. And proof of it is this. Here's the book, and you read it. Here's this book, and it shows that this guy is really the original. He's the original George Santos. He's the original, okay? Everything about his so-called story is fraudulent, and the book proves it. And yet, no one in the media really looks at this closely. No one over the years ever really picked away at the layers, ever really went through the onion. They didn't do it because Bob was a master at using his political power to silence the media and to control the media. And he did it because here he is in the New York City area, which is the heart and soul of media in America, right? And so that's how he was able to do it. He was a master of it. And I think to this day, people aren't aware, even now, of his influence. And I think the Khashoggi, by the way, the Khashoggi murder and his covering up of it, and no one really in the media space covering it much, is another example of, even though he's in prison, the media they're still sort of tentative in how they're approaching his story. And that's because of how powerful he was and how smart he was and how he manipulated the information, the confidential information he had received over the years to feed the media stories that, let me tell you, it really helped a lot of people in their careers rise over the years. But at the end of the day, it didn't help the American people. And the way it helped Bob was to enrich him with gold and cash. And so that to me was the biggest difference between him and everyone else I've ever worked on, was he was really the master in doing this with the media space.
To that point, the Khashoggi nugget in your book, I mean, that was really underreported. I haven't read something that went into that much detail about it, just maybe glossed over it once or twice. The book goes into major detail of it, and he described his past legal troubles that he eventually got out of as a resurrection. Now that's obviously not the case. He's sitting behind bars in federal prison. What do you think his legacy is going to be? Do you think he's just been reduced to that nickname Gold Bar Bob?
Oh, well, I think so, because I mean, his daughter again pointed it out in her letter, the letter she wrote to Judge Stein to have mercy on him, and not give him a long sentence. She said his legacy has been reduced to Gold Bar Bob. And I think so. Again, the visuals in this are just so um they're just so strong. So because he did great things on immigration. I mean, at least he spoke, you know, the way he spoke about human rights. Thomas had mentioned that, he recognized the Armenian genocide. He worked very hard to get the Senate to recognize that genocide. So he did, there were good things that he did, but are people going to remember that? Or are they going to remember the bars, the gold bars stuffed in the closet and the wads of cash, almost $500,000 worth in cash stuck in his shoes and his jackets? I think his legacy is Gold Bar Bob.
Thomas, what about you?
Well, I disagree a little bit, Isabel. I think his legacy hasn't been cemented yet. I think there are some more shoes to drop here, actually. I believe,
Cash filled shoes?
well, I know, right? I think there's a big shoe to drop on Jamal Khashoggi. And I think when that shoe does drop eventually, when the world does come to grips with what really happened there, Bob's role is going to come to the surface. And I think that's going to have a big impact on defining who he was, right? And then the other place where I think there may be another shoe to drop is down in the Caribbean. down in the Dominican Republic, down in South America, because he had such a huge impact on our embassy staffing in the Western Hemisphere for so many decades. And some of the decisions that were made over the years that helped people get into power who were our enemies, those decisions that were made were sparked by Bob Menendez and his policies, right? And so I think there are going to be some shoes to drop down there in South America and in the Caribbean. I think what we're seeing right now with the warships off the coast of Venezuela, I believe that's directly connected to decades of Bob Menendez messing us up as a nation in the foreign relations space in the Western Hemisphere. I believe that. And so I think whatever happens with Maduro and Venezuela, that's also going to be another impacting factor on what the definition of Bob's career was like. So I think it's not defined yet, and I think it could be worse than Gold Bar Bob. I think we're heading into the territory of a guy who uses position to support maybe terrorism and other things abroad. And so that's, I think I think there's a much darker aspect to this, and it's going to start coming out as the world starts to become aware of what his true impact was there as Foreign Relations Committee chairman.
Well, when and if we see that, I hope you both can come on and break it down. But I'm someone who I thought I knew a lot about this story. I've watched it closely over the past almost decade or so. And apparently, my knowledge didn't even scratch the surface because, like I said, when I opened this book, I mean, if this book was fiction and I was your publisher, I would tell you, hey, maybe take out a few details. It seems almost fake. That's how crazy the details in this book are. Where can people find it?
Okay, so the book is available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent bookstores.
Yeah, if you're in the airport right now listening, then you can stop by the bookstore in the airport. Go pick up, go pick it up.
Isabel and Thomas, thank you so much for the conversation. I loved reading the book. I hope everyone gets the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Brittany.
you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.